they throw out like CIA. Doug Caddy, who was the first lawyer for the Watergate burglars. No one had interviewed him before me. I did the first interview with that guy, and I got the day wrong. I called him up to do the live interview, and he says, "Oh, this is supposed to be tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, can you do it now?" Live on the air. Okay, so all these kinds of things. Okay, no one was doing this kind of stuff. No one was talking about these kind of topics. So much so that Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert station, run by Keith Rowland, they were supposed to start playing my shows. And when I sent over a show about the Franklin cover-up, they says, "What? We're not going to put this on our station. What are you, out of your mind, talking about organized pedophiles and blackmail rings? No, this is disgusting. No one's going to talk about this." And but now there's these topics that I'm known for have been proliferated. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts out there discussing these topics. And many, many books. I'm cited as the source in about 10, 15 books on these kind of topics, too. And many times they misquote me, okay? So there's that, too. So when you have all this attention to these topics by many people that aren't professionals, aren't savvy, aren't experienced, and pretty much learned about these topics from me or from Dave or from, let's say, Nick Bryan or a guy like Cisco Streetlove, who's dead also as well, or Maury Terry, who's dead also as well, when you start saying it that way, and he's also dead, and he's also dead, and he's also dead. These are all people I had on my show that first couple of years, Some people never heard of them, but now they're dead. Okay, we just had guy too, Brian Gemmell, who was a witness up there in Kinkara. He just passed away, So the suspicions around Dave McGowan's, and also too, I guess this also goes into this thread or this line of chain of thought, I guess I'm trying to say, is this woman here involved with this cult. She takes Dave's sober research into military intelligence being involved and pediocracy, understanding the F word, all his work there, that brilliant work. And she uses that as her base, because when she's describing the theory of her cult and that there's military intelligence interference and everything she's doing in her life and gang stalking she starts bringing in, then she starts talking about David Icke and reptiles and all this other stuff. See, so she takes a foundation, a solid foundation, but then just adds in a whole bunch of nonsense and craziness on top. And which is my complaint about my work here. We have a solid foundation, and now there's all this dilution, okay, of the topic. And there's a delusion, okay? People who think they're involved, people who sincerely think they're involved in the Epstein case, have nothing to do with it. People just showed up, wrote their first article in 2016, now considered an expert. Craziness, okay? How bizarre is it, though, that I've contact this woman in this cult. She's talking about Dave McGowan on the same day. I stumble on her. Okay. And meanwhile, I have this other woman kind of trying to lure me into this cult. Okay. And they're all talking about military intelligence, gang stalking, and turning off your cell phone and putting your cell phone face down so the camera is disabled, and all these things, because of all the surveillance of military intelligence, right? And this woman, too, she's doing these videos. Her whole expertise on military intelligence is no personal experience. It's just reading Dave McGowan's books and his website, Center for Informed America. And this triggers a memory in my head. Back in October, around Halloween, a very good friend of mine, we used to go to church with him in Las Vegas, especially back when Vic was going through all her problems. And I get a call from him the day after Halloween, and he goes, "Ed, man," he says, "He's not going to believe this. I'm stranded with no car in the Valley of Fire National Park. And I'm thinking, wait, he's out hiking and he's in the desert and he's calling me. How am I going to get? Do I get a helicopter going to get this guy? I said, well, what are you talking about, man? Can you make it back to the campgrounds? And he goes, oh, no, I'm in a campground. I don't have a car. I don't have a ride. They left me. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, he went, there was a sober living group, okay, that said, hey, let's go to Valley of Fire and we'll have a picnic up there and we'll camp out overnight and stuff like that so we won't get tempted with our sobriety over the Halloween parties. So he just met these people and he said, okay, great, I'll go up there with you. So they took him up there in a camper. He had a tent and stuff like that with a heater because it's very cold. It's like 60 degrees at night, 50, 40 degrees. And then they left him with the camper and with no car. And when I saw the text, he was sending me screenshots of the text. He's saying, why did you leave me here? And they're saying, well, this is just for the best. We think this is the best. Thank you, And it was just the craziest thing. And I says, well, we got to figure something out. Couldn't you get a Lyft and Uber? Because no way to get him back. Because Lyft and Uber, it's too far out. They're not going to come out there, So he tells me, though, that he walked to the other campsites, right? There were people at the other campsites. And the people were involved in a religious cult. And the people wouldn't let him use their phones because they said that they don't turn on their phones because of surveillance, government surveillance in their lives. So when I'm hearing this week, it reminded me of that whole thing last week because he finally did, when his phone went dead, he finally did text me from one of their phones. So they had my phone number. They could easily have looked me up and seen who I was. And you know what I'm saying? It's a really creepy week, man, as far as Dave McGowan goes. Oh, man. So, but I almost forgot all of this, too. So many people who talk about that Dave may have been assassinated. Dave felt when, he had the cancer and he was thinking, hey, maybe I got shot up with this cancer, He always put the blame on the John B. Wells shows he did about the Boston bombing. Now, I'm the guy that booked that show. I got him on John B. Wells. That's the biggest show he ever did, And I was doing some work for them, and I was doing some shows for them. I was being interviewed by them. And I was so broke at the time, I sold them my Rolodex of all my guests for $200, and I made a short list of the top 10 guys. And I said, Dave McGowan's the one in Boston bombing, and this book he wrote. And so he always felt that when he went on there, I mentioned him on Coast to Coast, mentioned him pretty much on all my interviews back in those days. Now, there were some other incidents, too, that right after I started on Revolution Radio, started bringing these type of guests on the air. Because on that station, all they had before I showed up was stuff about the end of the world and Nibiru and the Mayan calendars. And it was always the end of the world. It was going to be some kind of end of the world, It was also UFOs, all reptilians, all stuff like that. I was the first guy to bring in the Black Panthers, Move. I brought in the people from Move, that were burned alive over there on in those row houses in Philadelphia. And I knew about that story because I met them at Yippee headquarters when they had the first incident in the house at Osage Avenue. Okay, when again the police showed up with water cannons trying to evict them, and the Move women had to stand up on tables in the basement holding their babies over their head so that the babies wouldn't drown in the basement while there's a gun battle going back and forth between the cops and the men from Move. So these are the kind of people I start bringing on the air. Okay, it's a whole new ballgame. Now everyone's familiar with all these topics because everybody talks about them. But back then, nobody was. I'm telling you, Art Bell said, we're not putting you on our station. We're not talking about that. Are you crazy? Okay, now there's all people talk about Q and, and Epstein. Oh, everybody's next to it. Now, so as soon as I start doing these shows, I had just gotten on a station, and my merchant payment processing system for my business gets shut down, okay, where I can no longer accept credit card payments. Now, I've been in business my whole life. I had a cell phone business, and we had a lot of chargebacks in that business. And we had a whole department that dealt with chargebacks in that business. And after a while, they say, hey, you got to put some money on deposit here. You got to get some insurance. Cover this, all kinds of things you have to do to protect your business relationship with the merchant payments processing company. In this situation, I didn't have any kind of chargebacks like that. It was like maybe 1% of that, But they shut me down overnight. And I'm a pretty capable guy, and I know how to make a phone call and smooth things over and negotiate. And, okay, I'll put up a $10,000 deposit. And keep my merchant payment, increase my rate, from 1% to 3%. You negotiate these things. No one would talk to me, and it got to the point where I was called up one day and I was a little tired, and I said, well, who's this? And I said, it's Ed Opperman. She goes, this isn't Ed Opperman. I know Ed Opperman's voice. And I says, what? Here I'm talking to this big giant company, one of the biggest companies on the planet, okay? And the same person's answering the phone every time I call them up and knows my voice. And then it turns out that a woman who was a producer at Revolution Radio worked for that company. Then, the biggest, and I've told this story a little bit before, but the biggest Dave McGowan, Ed Opperman story is I had this crazy woman, okay, who volunteered to produce my show. And she totally catfished me, okay? I always thought she was like 15 years younger than me, so even though we had a friendly relationship, I never thought that it would develop into any kind of romantic kind of relationship because of the age gap. I thought she was a very young woman because the pictures she had sent me were like 10, 15 years old. She lied to me about her ethnicity. She told us this whole big story about how she bought this cabin up in the mountains and she restored the whole cabin. She rebuilt the whole thing. That was a complete lie. That was the cabin she was born in. She still lived with her mother and father and her brother with a disability in that cabin she was born in. Okay? But had this whole fantasy story she would tell us. Okay? About disputes with her neighbor was a stalker. All these crazy stories. And devoted so much time and energy into getting my show and inserting herself in with the guests and making friendly with the guests and stuff like that. Like a full-time job for no money, no pay. Then another fellow shows up, wants to be a sponsor on the show. Now, at first, these two claimed that they didn't know each other. Then when they did get to know each other, we were on conference calls and stuff like that, they claimed that they hated each other. Which it turned out that both of those stories could not be further from the truth. When Dave is lying on his deathbed in the hospital, this woman snuck into the hospital, snuck past Craig. Craig was sitting there guarding that bed 23 hours a day, and she was able to sneak past him the 1 minute he was gone and go in there and stalk Dave on his deathbed. Okay, this former producer of my show who totally catfished me, totally lied her ethnicity, her marital status, lied about everything in her life. Okay? So I think my relationship and my experience with Dave McGowan goes a little bit further than the average guy out there who's listening on YouTube. And I may know what I'm talking about when I talk about these things. So, but that's my Dave McGowan story that continues pretty much to this day, where now I got this whole cult situation. It seems to be a little inserting themselves into things around here. So we'll take a look at that in the future too. I got 15 minutes left, and honestly, let me see. Do I have 15? No, I only got. I'm going to play an outro. I'm only going to have 10. I got a great Michael Jackson story. Did you know that they went to this school, Michael Jackson in high school? I'll probably finish the story next week. Or maybe I'll do it in the member section. Because I still have to tell that other story about those counterfeiters. Michael Jackson, Christian Brando, the son of Marlon Brando, went to prison for murdering his sister's boyfriend, and was also involved in the Robert Blake murder too of his wife. Okay, because he was dating that wife for a while too. Okay, doing meth with her and stuff. Michael Jackson, Marlon Brando, and Danny Bonaducci. from the Partridge Family. They were all in the same class at the California Prep High School